This is a test of the Boundary Park alert system. Hello, welcome to the Boundary Park alert system, season 4, episode 3, but really this is the first proper Boundary Park alert system of the season, as we have football to discuss. And what football we have to discuss this week, joining me, I've got my old mate Andy Halliwell. Hello, Andy.
Good morning, Matthew.
Fresh from Cockles and Massels down in Southend.
Yeah, I had a full day out with the wife and kids. Went down early, went down to Southend Pier, went on the train, had fish and chips by the seaside.
Sounds like a good day so far.
All gearing up to a top day out. Then we made our way down to the ground and...
Paul Prendergast is the Latics Mine champion and the opening fan guest on the Boundary Park alert system this season. Hello, Paul.
Morning, chaps. You okay?
Did you have a similar day to Andy yesterday, or did you avoid it?
Well, I obviously went down. Got to be very careful because a lot of my students might be listening to this podcast, so I'm going to have to be on my best behaviour whilst getting away my very graphic thoughts of what happened on the field. I actually tweeted before the game, possibly the most optimistic I was going to feel during the whole season, having a pre-match pint, and my God, was I right? Just shocking, really, just unbelievable.
Well, we've first last two episodes, Andy. We've spoke to the manager in episode 1. Felt really upbeat. A lot of positivity around the ground. A lot of positivity in the manager's office. You know, it was a really good chat. Last week, predictions all full of promotion hope. This is Latics. One game in, 4-0 defeat against Southend, who are a club in turmoil. Not the best start to the season we would have not that it wasn't the best start, but just not the start any of us would have envisaged. I mean, we were fully expecting to see a side that had been well drilled, well trained. You know, the best pre-season preparations we've had for a long, long time. We thought we'd come out and hit the ground running. I think Southend, always going to be a difficult game. They kept most of the team from last season. Probably the worst time to play them, insofar as I think because they're under a transfer embargo, they've not got a massive squad. They're going to struggle more as the season progresses. So in some respects, we probably got them at the wrong time. But there's no excusing that performance just today, is there, Andy? I mean, that was absolutely abysmal.
I've been racking my brain for the best set of adjectives I can find to describe it. And
bearing in mind that Paul's students are listening, so I'm
going to be very careful with my P's and Q's. But the best way to describe it for me, it was an insipid, languid, spiritless, pathetic, disorganised display. I was disgusted at how inadequate it was, utterly abysmal. Reprehensible, in fact, loathsome. That's the best way I can describe that performance. David Unsworth, 2 episodes ago, promised us fast, dynamic football. That's what we were told to expect. It was slow, stagnant, and barely resembled football at times. It was a joke.
It was. Paul, where does the responsibility for that performance lie, in your opinion?
I think it's a mixture of the manager and the attitude from the players. I think the biggest issue was we all fell into the trap thinking this would be an absolute walkover. I think some of us looked at it with a little bit of trepidation of Southend having the attitude of it. We're all in it together, a bit of siege mentality. But we had enough out there yesterday to beat a team that's had probably half a pre-season, a disrupted pre-season, a pre-season where players have gone on strike. But I said at the end of last season that no matter what, I would back Unsworth. But already, I'm questioning that attitude from me. How can I back a manager whose team has set out not to lose a game? We've played 4 centre halves in the game. We've played Shelton and Sheeran in centre mid. It didn't massively work last season. How's it going to work this season? You've got strikers again that are so isolated, and people just want to slag off Joe Nuttall. How can the lad do anything when he isn't getting any service game after game? It's okay blaming individuals, but 1 to 11 yesterday, they all take collective responsibility, and the person who takes the most amount of responsibility for that absolute rubbish, mystifying performance has got to be Unsworth. And Ebrel, please, coming out saying they were sharper than us. How dare you? Those guys that played us yesterday haven't had a full pre-season. We were supposed to be raring to go. Well, I'm sorry, David, it's not good enough. And unless we get 6 points out of 6, we've over the next 2 home games, you've got to be questioning your future, because Frank has backed you to the hill. And if I was Frank Rothwell, I'd be absolutely livid after watching that complete pile of tripe we saw yesterday.
I totally agree. You cannot. What absolutely mystifies me is we knew last season that we didn't have anybody in the centre of that pitch who could dictate the pace of the game. Anybody who could pass through the lines and play the ball in behind for people to run onto. Anybody to play the ball over the top to feet. Anybody who can control the ball and play, cross-field passes and just dictate the tempo. One person in the centre of that midfield is what we needed to do that job. Now, they've signed 2 central midfielders over the summer in Dan Ward and Josh Lundstrom. Now, Lundstrom unfortunately got injured in pre-season, so we won't see him, we don't think, probably for 4 to 6 weeks from now. So we're going to be without him. And Dan Ward, I only saw 30 minutes of him yesterday, so it's very difficult to cast a judgment on his performance. But he didn't look materially different to Shelton or Sheeran.
No, he didn't.
And I have to say now, we've kept in contact with the Heave podcast, which is the Gateshead podcast from when they came on the phone in. Now, when we were linked with Dan Ward, we conversed with the Heave podcast, the Gateshead lads, and we asked them what's Dan Ward like. Apparently, we're linked with him, and the response that I surprisingly got from the Gateshead podcast was, Dan Ward, yeah, he's all right. He's fairly reliable, sort of 6 out of 10 every week, but I wouldn't say he's our best player or one of our best midfielders. I mean, obviously Conte was the best player they had, and he's gone on to Grimsby from Middlesbrough. But I'm really worried that we have not solved what was the self-evidently major problem in the middle of the park. So the point you make is, I agree with you on Nuttall. I think there's a player in Nuttall, and I don't understand why he just gets the sort of the ear of most of the people instantly. Because if he got service, I think he could be a good player. And obviously Norwood comes with a lot of quality experience at a higher leagues and above. He looked yesterday, Norwood, in sort of fits and starts like a beast.
Yeah.
His upper body strength. When he runs, his head moves like from side to side. Like he's an absolute animal when he runs. He's not the quickest. There's a chance in the second half where he couldn't get clear of the defender. But if you put the ball in front of goal for him, pulling it back, squaring it around the corner, playing it through the lines, he'll get onto him and shoot and score. I've absolutely no doubt. But neither of them were giving any service at all. The only player from the middle of the park that looked to make any difference yesterday, I thought, was Brennan Dickinson when he came on in the second half. He actually ran at them for a change. But Sheeran and Shelton just passed sideways, pair of crabs in the middle. I mean, Shelton went missing. But he was leaving gaping holes. Like, his positional sense was absolutely atrocious. Letting them run through the centre of us, and the pair of them are just powder puff, really. And I'm absolutely furious with the fact that we have not solved. And then when he's saying where does the blame lie, so of course the coaching staff take an enormous amount of blame for that. And if it isn't rectified quickly, then decisions will have to be made. But what about the recruitment department? So Steve Thompson is coaching now, as David Unsworth told us. He was on the pitch yesterday, taking the players through the drills before the start of the game. He's head of recruitment. What has he been trying to look for in centre midfielders? And what's the conversation that's going on between those departments and the stats department? Because Mark Shelton just doesn't look good enough to me. Not even really good enough.
Can I just make a point, Andy? I think we had the answer there possibly on the bench, and it's beyond belief that if Gardner's fit enough to be on the bench, why didn't he get 20, 30 minutes? Because we were crying out for a player to put his foot on the ball yesterday. Instead of the long ball rubbish we saw pretty much for 90 minutes, or just lumping it back to the opposition or passing to the opposition. If Gardner's not played in pre-season, but if he's fit enough to be on the bench, surely we can get 20 or 30 minutes out of him. In a game where we were crying out for somebody who could actually pass a ball, and it just beggars belief that we've put him on the bench and then we haven't seen to use him at any point. It's just crazy.
I mean, looking at what was available yesterday in terms of the personnel, obviously losing Green, that was quite late in the proceedings, but from what I can gather, didn't help. But it does expose the weaknesses that we have in the squad in terms of the positions. So we played 4 centre halves, I think, across the back 4 yesterday.
It was 3-5-2 from what I could tell. I was playing.
I think it was supposed to be. I think it was supposed to be. Yeah. What happened with Will Sutton got a lot of stick yesterday. I thought he did quite well actually, considering he was played on the right hand side of midfield.
He was our biggest threat.
He got a good cross in. He got forward a couple of times. Shelton kept going over to him and sticking to him like glue, which is why you were saying about him being out of position, Andy. Instead of staying in the middle of the park, he was because Hobson's not a right back, Will Sutton's not a right midfielder. I don't know if Shelton's like thinking I've got to overcompensate or whatever. So yesterday, where was Alex Reid? Why wasn't he in the squad? Why, like you say, why didn't Dan Gardner get a game after 50-something minutes when it clearly wasn't working, just before Will Sutton got sent off for what I think was a dubious... that wouldn't have even got in the book 20 years ago, that tackle, and now it's a red card. In terms of the formation... Yeah, it was supposed to be, I think, a 3 at the back, but it didn't work. Mark Kitchen was not involved in the game whatsoever. There was no service for the front players. Like you said, Dan Gardner, we were crying out for. If Lundstrom's going to make a massive difference, then brilliant, but we're relying on him, which means that, and you don't get promoted with a squad of 11 or 12 players. You need a promotion-ready squad. I thought we actually started to play a bit better when Sutton got sent off, and some of our midfield players decided that they were going to have to start pushing forward a bit more. Sheeran was actually getting forward a bit more. But we went down to 10, and then obviously it all fell apart, and they scored 3 goals when we had 10 men. But the responsibility for yesterday we looked like a team who didn't know what they were doing, who hadn't been put together during pre-season to know what they were doing, who looked slow. They looked slow all over the park. There was no pace. There was no urgency. Southend was sharper. Look, we've been saying about patience and backing the manager and all that. I stand by it. 1 game into the season, it does not mean that the season is over by any stretch of the imagination. However, we said we'd wait until we've had some football played in anger to make assessments, and we'll take it. I'll take it 1 game at a time. 1 game at a time. And based on that 1 game, there was nothing to suggest that we've had an excellent pre-season. There was nothing to suggest that the signings we've made have helped give the manager a clearer indication of how he wants to play. And it was just like, and there's no point repeating all those adjectives you used, Andy, but it was all those things. It was a really, really, really disappointing start to the season. Absolutely inexcusable from top to bottom, from the manager and the coaching staff right the way down to the players. They have all got to really, really show us what they're made of on Saturday against Aldershot, because, it showed, Andy, you were there, you were both there, lads. How quickly did it turn in terms of the atmosphere from, when the Blues blew in Tangerine at the beginning of the game to people getting on players and management's back?
Well, you couldn't say. I mean, you've obviously got a cohort of fans who had made their mind up about David Unsworth and are ready to jump on anything that they can from the off. But they were entirely justified with that yesterday. I couldn't take issue with anybody having a pop, because it was absolutely disgraceful. But from the start, it was all support.
Mm-hmm. You could hear it on the stream loud and clear, Andy.
Yeah, everyone was behind the team. Nobody was being negative from the off. They absolutely battered us for the first 15 minutes. Could have been about 3-0 after 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Everyone was in shock, I think. We were absolutely in shock. I was in shock. And we were looking at each other just completely bemused as to what was going on. And yes, there were audible boos at half-time. And quite rightly, because it was a disgrace. So you couldn't really take issue with what was going on in the terrace. I'd rather people didn't start shouting stuff at players, like, there's people shouting stuff at Nuttall. I'd rather they didn't do it, because what's the point? He's not going to help him at that point in time. But no, I don't think you could apportion any blame towards supporters yesterday. But they're going to have to pull their socks up and really try to sort it out. I think back to some of the things that David Unsworth has said before. He's said quite a few times, it's not about formation. So it's not about how you set up. It's about the players on the pitch. We put better players on the pitch. We will have, our stats will improve. We pointed out the possession stats deficit that we had last season, which was largely to do with the fact that we don't retain the ball very well. And we asked him about that, and he said things will improve as you get better players. Okay, fine. Well, they didn't. We could not retain that. Every time we got the ball, we gave it away in no time. And to Paul's point earlier, the hoofball for me is as a direct result of the midfield having to go back because they don't have the creative nous to put the ball in positions for strikers or wide players to get onto. They can't thread the passes through. They can't. Every pass we make always appears to be under pressure, like they're about to lose the ball. It's not with time. They don't have time to look up and pick a pass. So we go backwards because we're under pressure, which then invites a hoofball. And often that hoofball wasn't even diagonal, it was straight. So it just comes straight through to the Southend goalkeeper. It was absolutely like park football at times.
But there was just no composure anywhere on the pitch. There was no one taking a touch and finding a man and just like easing the pressure. At one point it was something like 71% possession to Southend, and that was well into the game. I think it ended up 60 something anyway. But like, no one on the players on the pitch did not take control of the game at all. And whether you're talking about formation, the formations can be kind of fluid and they can kind of change through the game. But
can I make a point about the formation, Matt?
Yeah, of course.
I only saw a couple of pre-season friendlies, but both the pre-season friendlies I saw at Chorley and at Southport, we played 4-4-2. Now, from what I've read and what I've heard, we played mostly 4-4-2 throughout pre-season. And then all of a sudden we're playing 3-5-2 again. Now, it didn't work when he first came in this. Now, is it because he didn't trust the personnel available yesterday and reverted to his favourite formation that failed miserably last season because he didn't have the width and the pace, so he just wanted to try and pack the middle a little bit.
How could we have been playing 3-5-2 though when we had Hobson, Hogan, Raglan, and who else at the back?
So so those three were the three centre.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Those three are the three centre halves. And then you had Will Sutton wide right, Kitchen wide left. You 3 minutes in the middle and 2 at front. That's how it's set up. I mean,
so he stayed with what it was going to be when Green was in the side, or supposed to be in the side. Yeah.
So it just didn't really make sense, and we just didn't have that width. I mean, Kitchen, we know he is a decent player, but he's terrified of crossing the halfway line. What's that about? We thought we were getting this rampaging left-sided defender stroke wing back, and the guy's terrified of crossing the halfway line. Like I said earlier, our biggest threat was Sutton, a centre half playing right wing. Now that can't be right, can it? I mean, the only crosses we were getting in that first half were coming from Sutton. And Kitchen was, again, just, there's something not right. He's terrified of overlapping or taking his man on or just trying to get... Every ball from Kitchen yesterday was just hoofed down the wing. That's all he did to nobody. Because the strikers, as I said earlier, were so isolated because the only issue we've got is we don't get midfielders that run in beyond. You don't score goals from midfield if your midfielders don't run beyond the strikers. But
that's what I was saying before about when Will Sutton got sent off. Sheeran, for example, was getting further forward up the pitch, and we were actually putting more pressure on Southend with 10 men for a period with 10 men. Because the midfielders were bombing on, it was like there was more space for us to play, and the players were having to take the responsibility of filling that space more than they were when there was 11 men on the pitch, which is completely the wrong way around. Like next week, I mean, against Aldershot, we've got Aldershot and Halifax next week, 2 home games, 2 games that we should be winning. based on our optimism from last season. And the fact that
despite the fact both won yesterday.
Exactly. But based on the results against them last season and all that kind of stuff, they shouldn't be head and shoulders above us. So what concerns me is I'm hoping that next week, we can all put this to bed, put this to one side. And when I say all of us, I mean the fans. Sure, the atmosphere will be good at the beginning before the game. I'm sure no one's going to carry it over. But the players and the management as well have got to do something. They've got to say, right, that didn't work. That was terrible. And if we go out and play the same way and the same formation and with the same ideas, it's going to happen again. And the fans are going to turn on us, and rightly so, because to go out and do the same thing next week would be stupid. It would be stupid. So they've got to do something this week. They've got to know clearly who's available, who's fit enough. Maybe they'll try and bring somebody else in during the week. Maybe there's some deals that are hovering that haven't quite been done yet. Who knows? But something's got to change for next week. And next week we've got to see some fast, dynamic football over the 90 minutes, because we saw none yesterday. It was embarrassing.
A couple of points, Matt. What really surprised me yesterday, and we can criticise fellow fans, and genuinely, we were very, very annoyed yesterday. But I think the reaction from the fans at the end was pretty restrained compared to how it could have been. And I think a lot of that, in diffusing the situation, was Liam Hogan. He dragged that full squad over to clap the fans, and that took balls to do that. It really did, because those players deserved absolute pelters, and unbelievably, a large portion of the crowd actually applauded them. Yeah, a lot of them gave them grief. I just stood there and shook my head in disbelief. But fair play to the players for coming over and actually applauding the 660 people that made that journey yesterday. And that's what we need going forward. It's as disappointing, as annoying, as devastating it was yesterday. It's one game out of 46. And like you said, Matt, we need to draw a line under it. We need to come together. We've got 2 home games. Let's get the 6 points and go to Chesterfield on a high. And this is how Unsworth needs to be thinking as well. But what he needs to do, like you say, is not make those same mistakes again. He needs to think where he gained those margins in that second half of last season and pick a team that's going to go out and win a game, not soak up pressure and nick a goal. He needs to pick a team that goes out and wins the game, dominates the possession, fast-flowing football, gets the crowd behind them, and let's move on and let's start realising the undoubted potential we've got in this squad.
Well, I obviously we all agree with those words. I think other things. So responding to some of those bits. So I've got my 2 kids with me yesterday. I'm a wife, and the vitriol around me, there's a few lads behind us, literally spitting blood and swearing, and I've got my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old next to me. It is what it is. You sort of have to roll with it. But I took them at 3-0 down. I left because I didn't want my 2 kids to see it at the end, because I didn't know how bad it would be, and I didn't want them to see it. And they were sort of a bit uncomfortable with it. And I feel really sorry for them, because I'm trying to get them into it. And imagine if we'd have been on the front foot and scored a couple of goals, it would have been a party atmosphere in there, and they would have been up for it, and it would have been exciting. But I'm now worried about taking them again to experience it. And someone collared me on the way out going, "Hey, where are you going? You've got a podcast to record tomorrow. You need to stay till the end." I was like, I've got to get out. I can't see the end of it. So yeah, it's really bad. We've got to try and we're trying our best to get rid of this attitude on the terrace, but he's got to put something out on the pitch for us to get behind.
Absolutely, it's a joint responsibility. The whole thing is a joint responsibility. We go back to the last few seasons of the owners that we had and the situation that we were in, and it was all about coming together to try and improve the football club and get rid of those people, get better people in. Well, that's been achieved. We have better people at the football club. Now it's about, we've all got to trust each other. I think that we have to trust the board to make the right decisions with regards to the footballing, side of things, as and when it becomes appropriate that management needs to change, as it will inevitably over time. I'm not talking necessarily about right now in this season, but if it happens this season, it happens this season, because if we went out and lost 4-0 for the next 3 or 4 games as well, then there'd be clearly something very, very wrong. But so we have to trust the management to look at the issues and fix them. Now, they have a finite amount of time to do that. The board have a finite amount of time. We have then as a responsibility as fans to at least try our best to get behind the team at Boundary Park next week. We were terrible away from home last season as well, wasn't we? So this is kind of carrying on from where we left off. It's getting out of this division is as much about character as it is about ability. And what we're going to see now, in some ways, losing 4-0 away on the first game of the season, it could be a good thing, because this is now about character. It's about the players' character. It's about the manager's character. What are they going to do? How are they going to respond? You can turn a negative into a positive if you've got the right attitude towards it, and that's the opportunity that they now have. Will they do it? We'll find out next week, and that's part and parcel of football. That's why we love it, because it changes from week to week. But it's not all doom and gloom. But there is a lot of serious questions that they've got to have to look themselves in the eye over the next week at training, and they're going to have to really pull something out of the bag for that Aldershot game, because it's hard to keep a fan base motivated, especially when a fan base has been through what we've been through. Now, some of the things that came up on Twitter was this argument about culture. And Andy, we've discussed this on the podcast, where changing a culture doesn't just happen because you change all the personnel. And even if the attitude has changed within the camp, a culture can still persist. And maybe there's a bit of that. I mean, none of us have the answer. When we talk about these things, we're speculating. We're trying to find answers. We're trying to find different perspectives to say. But we don't all have the answers. We don't know. But we've had this conversation that the culture at the club will take some time to shift from this losing, desperate, hanging on mentality that has been in there to a winning, progressive one.
My answer to that is, so from Christmas on, the back end of last season, we were third in the table. We went on a reasonable run of victories and draws that pulled us comfortably away from the bottom. It wasn't pretty, but I was prepared to deal with that and sort of say, well, let's wait and give it time, because the club in terms of the coaching staff, the recruitment department, and everybody need time to be able to bring better players in and tweak the way that we play. The problem with yesterday is it's only a sample of one, but the problem with yesterday is nothing had been changed. It was exactly the same. So that is a real concern if that persists. That's not
a cultural thing, though, is it? That's a conscious decision, presumably from the coaching staff in terms of.
It's either that. It's either that or it is the culture that's taking time to wash through. But they've had the thing that's frustrating is you've had a whole pre-season to reset, a whole pre-season to sort of set up the way you want to go, and begin on the front foot and have a complete fresh start. And none of that has happened. And Southend, like Paul said earlier, they were on strike. They only had 15 players on the back of the programme. They can only have 16 in totality. They can't sign anyone like properly other than a unattached player because of the embargo. And I said, I stood with Steve Shipman in the first half, and I said to him, you'd imagine that in the second half they come out absolutely fired up Southend to try and prove a point, which you can kind of understand. But I said they've got to run out of steam. They've not had a full pre-season. So after 60 minutes, they're going to be blowing, and we should come into the game here because we've had a full pre-season and we should be on top. Now, obviously, we went down to 10 men, but they scored 3 goals later in the game. We didn't do anything. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I couldn't believe how bad it was. It's as bad as given the context, that was horrendous. And so that has to change quickly. And yes, you can say culture persists, but they should have been doing as much as they could to try to arrest some of that over the summer. And that was not a good start. It really was not a good start. Everyone's heads dropped.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen firsthand like the difference in the ground, in the facilities, and that kind of thing should affect facilities and stuff, and the way that business is conducted should affect the culture and everything else. And I'm sure the culture is changing. I've no doubt about that. But I mean, when you bring it down to the football side of things, I think it was the second goal when he shot from outside the area, not a particularly hard shot that went right into the corner, took one bounce and went over Norman, but the amount of time and space that he had to decide he was going to take a shot on from there was absolutely criminal. Like, not closing plays down, stopping them from shooting. That kind of thing, it happened last season. I can't remember who against, but I can remember goals last season where the same thing happened. The defense had dropped so deep that a guy picking up the ball on the edge of the box had all the time in the world to get a shot away, and they're going in. It's early days, and I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to go back on everything that I've said already. But it's up to, like I said, this is down to character now. This is down to people showing us what they're made of.
The point you're touching on there, I heard a few people, and it's happened over pre-season, people sort of calling out Magnus Norman for conceding, shots from outside the area, in effect. And he does appear, on face value, to concede quite a few goals from outside the area. But that's the point that I come down, the one you've just made, is we don't close it down. No, there's no midfielders going to engage the player on the ball. They get chatty. If you'd have given Norwood or Nuttall as much, I mean, Nuttall had one shot in the first half, their keeper pulled the save off. If you gave them that time, but they weren't giving us that time, and we weren't putting them in a position to have that time, and that was the difference. The other things that puzzle me, I said this last week, we've chased Kurt Willoughby since last Christmas or before, scouted him, wanted him, chased him. Other clubs were after him. Football League clubs were trying to sign him, and we sold our club to him. 20-odd goals in a division below, admittedly. But he's barely featured in pre-season, and he's benched all game yesterday, not getting a sniff. What's the point?
Can I make a point on that, Andy? Can I make a point on what might be happening with him? Are we not driven by the data now? Are we not using software to look at where our players are at and our targets, etc.? And is it purely a numbers game with Willoughby? Is he not reaching the standards in training, etc. that other players are? Because that can be the only thing for me. Because like you said, we spend 6 months chasing the lads. We don't play him through pre-season, and he doesn't get a look in yesterday when we're getting battered.
Well, you make an assumption. Well, I'm not. It's not even an assumption. We've asked this question of Darren Royal when we interviewed him last season, and we asked the question of David Unsworth 2 episodes ago about how those departments work together, and both of them answer in one frame or another that yes, there's data researching players, so casting a net as wide as possible within sort of your addressable market, the people that you can possibly attract. You cast that net wide, you look at the stats, and then that should allow you to then sort of pre-qualify or filter those down to a smaller number of players that you think fit the bill. You then go and scout them. So the scouts have been going out watching Willoughby, presumably, for game after game. We've had him scouted umpteen times, reports written on him umpteen times. So it's not just the numbers. It's not a blind recruitment from a spreadsheet. It's a combination of proper quality control. Then they're going to, when they speak to the player, they'll assess his character and talk to his agent about what what he wants to achieve in the game. Maybe, I don't know. And all of those things are going to come together to make a final decision. I just find it curious that we've had, in effect, that long length of time to make a decision on whether he fits the bill or not. And on face value, he does. But if the point you're making is right, that we've recruited him based on what we think we've seen, then when he's in the building, he doesn't marry up to what we believe we've recruited, then that's a recruitment failure. So, and that's the point I was making about Steve Thompson earlier. So Steve Thompson is heading that department and making those recruitments. Where is that central midfielder who can put his foot on the ball and pass it around? And why, if it is, it's a complete conjecture, if they don't now fancy Kurt Willoughby, then whose fault is it for deciding to sign him and assuming we're paying him a reasonable sum of money anyway, because it wasn't like he had no other choices. So I just find some of those things concerning and curious, and they're going to need to be addressed. And I'm sure I'm sure the Rothwells and Darren Royal, who you would trust to make solid decisions, are going to be discussing what needs to happen and what there's got to be milestones in place now, whatever they are, whether they're points, targets by games, position in the table. You know, I was mulling it over last night. Like, for me, what would I do in that situation? I think 10 games. If we're not comfortably inside the top 7 after 10 games, we're going to have to look at someone else, aren't we? Because that's not going to be good.
That's where I'm at now, Andy, to be honest. Yeah. I when I got to the point about March time, I thought, right, results have improved. Performances haven't really, but you know what? It is a results business. It's time to back the guy. And I really do want to back him. But for me, 10 games, if we only get a point out of the next 2 home games, what happens then? Because 1 point out of 3 potentially could be 8 points off the playoff places after 3 games.
What I want to see is these things, you know, 10 game, whatever, but like in game, things have got yesterday, right? Sutton, it's all right. So they're prepared for the game. They're prepared for playing with wing backs and Green on it. Green gets injured, can't play, right? So they decide to start the game with that same format. At half time yesterday, clearly that wasn't working. You mentioned players like Willoughby. You can see that the front players weren't getting any service. You could have sacrificed Nuttall, for example, at half-time. You could have put Willoughby. You could have changed to a 4-3-3. It wasn't working. If the formation isn't rigid, then come out in the second half make some substitutions and give Southend something different to think about. Because what was happening in the first half was never going to win us that football match. And we carried on exactly the same vein. Nothing changed until Will Sutton got sent off. So what you've got to start seeing is some kind of... Now, this is what frustrates me when I try and defend people like Steve Thompson, John Ebrill, David Unsworth as football people. They know more about football than I do. So why don't they try and make changes in a game? Because that's what I'm expecting from people who know more about the game than I am. I'm expecting them to make changes which affect the game in terms of formation and personnel and do things that I don't see because they've got a better football brain and a better football understanding than I have. But to go out and just keep the same thing on the pitch and do the same things that aren't working, well, I can do that. I can pick a team, put it on the pitch, watch it for 45 minutes, and then at our time go, yeah, this is not working, but I'm going to stick with it. It doesn't take any... What I'm expecting from the management team is to make some changes, give Southend something to think about, accept that what they've tried isn't working and make some changes. And that is the kind of thing that football fans get annoyed about. And rightly so. Yesterday, it was just we were onto a hide into nothing with the way that the team was set up, and something's got to change. Simple.
The definition of insanity, isn't it? Keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. I mean, it is coining a phrase there, but he doesn't seem to learn from his mistakes, and there may be some of those red flags and articles that the Everton fans were writing. Maybe we should have been taking more notice of them. But you know what? We go again on Saturday and we get behind them and hope we turn it round very, very quickly. But like you both say, if it isn't turned around very quickly, then serious questions and decisions have to be considered.
Definitely. Right, Matt, should we do 40 minutes of ranting? Should we do the first Latics Mind of the 23-24 season now? Slightly earlier than we would normally.
Well, since we've got the existing champion on, somebody who needs to set the bar for the coming season, why not, eh?
Yeah, and I set the questions, Paul. So for this week, obviously, because Paul does kindly, as a reminder for everyone, set the questions for us every week, which I'm sure he'll do from after this week. So I hope I've set the standard. Well, you'll see the standard I set it at. So make sure it's reasonable every week from there on in. Right, let's give it a whirl. Let's see how we get on.
Oh, that's my cue, isn't it, Andy?
It is.
There we go.
Since 2013, only 2 Latics players have scored on the opening game of the season. Jonathan Fort is one. Who is the other?
Gardner.
Correct. Since 2010, we've only won twice on the opening day. Once against Stevenage, the other again.
Away.
Correct. Over the same time period, how many times has a single Latics player scored a brace on the opening game?
3 times.
Correct. Fort, Baxter and Stevens.
Yeah.
Who was manager of Latics last time we went the first 5 games of a season undefeated?
Dickoff.
Correct. 10-11. 08-09 is the last time we were 9 points after 3 games and top of the table. We beat Millwall and Cheltenham at home. Who did we beat away?
Leeds United.
Correct. The last time we reached the playoffs was in 06-07. How many points did we have after 6 games?
5.
Ooh, wrong. 4. Prior to that, 02-03 playoff season, how many points have we amassed from the first 6 games on that occasion?
8.
Correct. 86-87 was our first playoff appearance. How many points did we have after our first 6 games then?
14.
Wrong. 16. During our 3 years in the top flight, how many games did we win on the opening day?
None.
Correct. Just about started the next question there. So I've started, so I'll finish. I'll give you one more. In our 1990-91 championship season, how many league games did we go undefeated at the start of the season?
16.
Correct.
Go on, buddy.
That is some bar, that. Right, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 correct. And I only asked you 10 questions.
Should we just give him the trophy again now then, or what?
That's absolutely fantastic start, that, isn't it?
Well done, Paul.
What a bar to set.
I'm glad I got 2 wrong, to be honest.
Well, you've got to give everybody else a chance, mate. So, the interesting thing I took from that, Andy, was the playoff questions. The games after 6, the points after 6 games.
Yeah.
Did you say one was 4 points?
Right. So this is the reason I wanted to do the Latics Mind in the middle of the episode, because we can talk about it now because it's kind of relevant to this position. So in 06-07, first 6 games, we won 1, drew 1, lost 4. And we were in the playoffs at the end of the season. So we had a pretty bad start 06-07 and then came into it. In 02-03 under Dowie, we'd won 2, drew 2, lost 2 of the first 6. So again, not the greatest start, middle of the pack, and then improve later. It was only 86-87 when actually, we finished 3rd that year and were top and 2nd for a lot of it. That was mine and Paul's first season supporting the club. We won 5
badly after Christmas, didn't we? That's what cost us. And Derby and Portsmouth ran away with it, didn't they?
They did, yeah. We'd won 5, drew 1 of the first 6. So that's the only one. I was obviously the championship season. We went 16 games undefeated. My next question was, because I won't be able to do it next week, was who ended that run after 16 games undefeated?
Port Vale 1-0 defeat. I was there.
Yeah, so was I.
The first league away game that was.
Yeah, got beat 2-0, didn't we? I was there as well.
1-0.
Was it 1? Was it?
They were 2-0 the year before. Yeah.
Was it Darren Beckford who scored for him?
Beckford backheaded it. Nicky Cross knocked it over the line.
That's right. Yeah. So,
guys, you don't stand a chance against this fellow. I'm sorry, unless there's somebody out there that is an undiscovered equal.
We need to
find them. If you know who they are. It's. I mean, it's very clever what you've done, Andy, because it poses that question of what to do. We had it last season, didn't we? With the old stick or twist. I was thinking about this earlier on. last season, people were calling for Sheridan's head early doors. Then they were calling for Unsworth's head early doors. We could have easily, if it was down to a different system where, some Twitter polls decided who the manager was, we could have easily have had 3 managers last season based on, some of the desires of some of our supporters. Is there much difference between getting rid of the manager in the first 10 games of this season as there is from getting rid of him last season? How much time does a manager need? There's contradicting arguments, I guess, from each side, and ultimately it's up to the board to make that decision. So that's where I'm not going to put a massive amount of external pressure through this podcast. I mean, we have a platform that most people don't. We have a football forum that we invite people onto to come and share their views and opinions. We try and be balanced on this. We try, if we're going, if we have feelings one way or another, I like to think that we try and bring in the alternative view as well. It's not just, I don't want to use this platform to put pressure on a manager because I think it's my viewpoint. At the same time, I don't want to sort of be a happy clapper for something. I like to try and look at something realistically. There's a chance that we could have a poor start to this season. You just, brought attention to that, Andy. We could have a poor start to this season and still finish it strong and still do well.
Can I add some facts to that, Matt, please?
Please, absolutely.
Those 2 playoff campaigns, again, fine margins. 0-2-0-3, we won 2 out of the first 6, then won 8 on the trot. So Derry's team found its feet and clicked massively. In 06-07, it was all about Porter getting fit. So in the 7th game, we played Bournemouth away. We were 2-0 down. We come back to 2-2. I think Liddell got a brace and we ended up losing 3-2. But Porter came back that day, and all of a sudden, we scored a couple of goals. We'd not been scoring goals. And then the game after that, we beat Scunthorpe, and then we went to Forest and won 2-0. And Porter coming back into that team made such a difference. Now, this season, it could be somebody like Lundstrom that just makes that difference. It is fine margins. Yesterday was absolute pants. But again, I keep saying it, and you said it as well, and a lot of other fans are saying it as well, that aren't overreacting. And I'm not so sure people are not entitled to overreact. But it's 1 game out of 46, and we've got 3 out of the next 5 at home. Let's see what happens. And it could be just a player getting fit, a tweaking formation that allows it to click. Now on the other side of that, there are a lot of the same issues that we had last season. So we've got to try and find that balance, haven't we? It is 1 game out of 46. Hopefully something will click, and we've certainly got the squad to click. But I don't think the personnel missing yesterday did us any favours, for whatever reason. Whether we've got COVID in addition to Unsworth, whether we picked up a couple of injuries. How Ward has managed to tweak a muscle on the opening day of the season when he's supposed to be fit and conditioned is a little bit disappointing. But hopefully we will get some bodies back and we will be able to change that formation and then start to go on a run. Because it was really gloomy at the start of the 06-07 season. We were either scoring a goal, as you said, Andy, 4 points out of 18, only 8 points out of 18 in 02-03. We got spanked at home to Wickham in that 6th game. There was a dreadful 0-0 draw against Blackpool. Cardiff completely outplayed us on the opening day. The only highlight in that first 6 games in 02-03 was beating Tranmere 2-0 and Clint Hill and non-contract Claude Reinhardt scoring. So it might be a player getting fit. It might be a player coming in through the door that makes all the difference. And I'm not going to write this season off after 1 game. And hopefully a lot of other fans won't either. And to get where we want to be, we need to pull together. Yes, we ask the questions. We criticise when needed. But let's just pull together, and better times are ahead. We've got to believe that. And that's coming from me, the most fickle Latics fan you'll ever meet. But better times have got to be ahead, and we've got to pull together and believe that.
Well, look, I mean, I would take the club being in the health it's in now and not going up this season than the club being where it was before. If we don't go up this season, it's a lot of money and effort is going into it. but it's not the end of the world. Going out of business is the end of the world. You know, being in a situation where, you know, it may still happen to Southend, where you get a points deduction in National League and you're under a transfer embargo. This is the kind of thing that would have happened if Abdallah had stayed in charge. So I'm still, maybe because we were so deeply involved in it, we have a slightly longer perspective on these things than some of the other fans maybe who are, you know, concentrating on the football. And if you're just concentrating on the football and you know, then yesterday and everything else, you can understand the frustration. For me, I'm just kind of maybe a little bit more, I've got a longer perspective on it. Let's just put it that way. Now, that's not to say that I don't want us to languish in this division. I don't think we will, but it's a very, very difficult division to get out of. And the evolution of the football club over the last 12 months, some smart ass on Twitter was quoting me about how much things had changed, but things have changed massively. You can't see that there's something wrong with you. The club has changed immeasurably in the last 12 months. We are set up to succeed, but that doesn't guarantee us success straight away. Because this is, if you've been a football fan for a long time, like you've just said, that you backed all that stuff up beautifully, Paul, with those stats, that we're set up for success, but we might not succeed straight away. It's just the way it goes. Now, the manager may turn out to be an instrumental factor in that, and we will see one way or the other. After one game of the season, we're in no better position to really know that, unless you've already made your mind up. I like to think myself as an open-minded person, which means that I can be persuaded one way or the other based on the facts and the evidence. And this season, we don't have enough evidence. However, yesterday was a shocker across the board. None of us are making any excuses for that.
I think on the pitch, it's got to be about the P word this year. And I don't mean promotion, I mean progress. We've got to see progress on the pitch. And if that means we finish 8th, then so be it. It will be disappointing, but let's see progress. Let's find our identity. Our identity off the field at the moment is magnificent. Brand Oldham Athletic in the town and online is absolutely wonderful compared to what it's been. But what is our brand on the pitch? We want to see progress. We want to see an identity on the field of Oldham Athletic. And if that leads to promotion, great. But as long as it leads to progress, yes, I'll be very disappointed if we don't go up this season. But give us hope of better times around the corner. And there's got to be.
It relates to that question that you of recruitment, Andy, that you were saying. I mean, when you talk about identity and progress on the pitch, a style of play is very easy. Now, let's not compare ourselves to Notts County and Wrexham, because both of them were in this division for a long time, and it took them a long time to build the sides that got 100 points over the last 2 seasons. So we're not. If you think we're going to move from where we were last season to being like Notts County or Wrexham, then that's unrealistic. It's just not going to be the case. Doesn't mean it won't happen in a season or two, but we're not going to go from that to that. Chesterfield, another case in point, they've been in this division a while. It takes time to build teams that are going to dominate a division. But both Wrexham and Notts County, you can say what type of football they played. And they built that identity on the pitch, and they built that progress on the pitch. We're not going to jump. I think we need to establish that we're not going to, despite signing players like Norwood, we don't jump from being that very, very average team last season to being a 100-point team this season. It's just not going to happen. Progress is incremental. And like you said, Paul, we have to see evidence of it through the first 10 games of this season, first and foremost. Before we need to see evidence of it next week at home against Aldershot and Halifax. Because, like you said, Andy, the evidence of yesterday's performance wasn't that we progressed. It wasn't even that we stayed the same. It was we went backwards. We started the season worse than we ended last season. That's just the fact. So that means that the guys that are responsible for making the changes have got to make the changes. I'm not talking about sacking the manager. I'm talking about on the pitch. I'm talking about the management team and the players. Next week has got to be vastly different.
Absolutely. And as we come towards the end of this episode, is next week when the pod fanzine will make its first appearance?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, absolutely.
So everyone look out for the fanzine being handed out?
Yeah, well, we're handing out a free fanzine just to try and make our, there's only so much reach you can achieve online. And so we want to try and make as many Latics fans as possible aware of the podcast. So we're going to hand out a fanzine. There's no plan to make it a regular thing, but it's something that I've put together over the summer, and hopefully it'll be a nice read, and it'll help us just to attract a few more listeners and get a few more people involved in things like the football phoning, because the football phoning is, I think it's unique. I don't know of any other clubs that have got one. Not that I've bothered to actually have a look, but no one else. I think it's great that we can all have these discussions, and that we all have contradictory opinions, and sometimes it gets quite nasty on social media because people have got different opinions. That is not. I mean, we live in a democracy. The basis of a democracy is that we're all entitled to have different opinions, and we respect those differences in opinion, and we talk about them, like grown-ups and adults. With maturity. So come on the phone in. I would love to have big queues of people wanting to get involved in the phone in, and let's talk about the football. I mean, how blessed we are that we're now in a position where the things that we're talking about are on the pitch, and management related and player related, tactics related, performance related, because we've come a long way, baby. Guys, thanks very much for your efforts this week. It's been great. Paul, congratulations on winning Master Latics Mind 23-24 on the first day of the season.
It's a long time to go.
That's amazing. Back-to-back wins. I think if you win it again, we might as well just cancel it or just ban you from getting involved, I think. Well,
I'm actually surprised you let me have a go last season, to be fair.
That's only fair. But you've set the bar there. And talking about setting the bar, lads, next week, could you please do the same? Thanks very much. The Boundary Park Alert System is hosted and produced weekly by Matt Dean, Andy Halliwell and Dave Bradley for Q-Pod Productions. A huge thank you goes to all those people who already subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate you all and thank you for helping us out. If you'd like to help us out, please visit oafcpodcast.co.uk and click support, or find the link in the show notes. It's only $2.99 a month, and we'll draw a subscriber at random every month to win an Oldham Athletic shirt of your choice. Please follow and interact with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok at OAFC Podcast, and subscribe to youtube.com/The Boundary Park Alert System, where you will find the Latics Football Phony with myself and Dave Bradley live every Wednesday from 8:30 till 9:30 p.m. We'd like to thank Arlene Finnegan for writing our excellent weekly blog, which we encourage you to read on our website every Saturday morning. Thanks also go to Paul Prendergast for providing us with all the Latics Mind questions. The title music for the show is by Manchester DJ and producer Starion, and for more information visit bandcamp.com/Red Laser Records. You can help change the game by listening to us on the Fan Hub app along with all major podcast platforms, but please like, subscribe and review the pod to help us climb the rankings and to gain more listeners. oasf.co.uk and pushtheboundary.co.uk are where you'll find out more information about our official FSA affiliated supporter groups and continue to raise money for the 1895 fund. Thank you for listening, and if you'd like to be a guest or contribute to the show, we'd love to hear from you.